Now, we all do some things wrong. Silly mistakes, carelessness being a part of day-to-day life. One thing many of us end up getting mocked for is not knowing right from left. Well, for those who have routinely been made fun of because of this, there is good news. You are not alone. Studies say that about 1 in 6 people have trouble differentiating between the two sides. Let's think about where all this comes into play first. The most obvious one being directions. How many times have you accidentally told someone to go the wrong way or send the delivery guy to the wrong house? What about turning things? Struggling to turn a doorknob, for example, shutting off the tap instead of letting the water out. Well, the next time someone calls you out for these little directional errors, you can say that it is a problem that others are going through as well, and you are not alone. Research shows that telling right from left is more difficult than distinguishing between up and down or back and front. And that is because of symmetry. Think about, for example, when you look at yourself in a mirror, if you raise your right leg, your reflection moves with you. You know that's your right leg being reflected. What would happen if instead of a mirror, a person was facing you, mirroring your actions? Which of their legs would they raise when you raised your right leg? That's a bit confusing, right? Let me break it down further for you. What about when you're driving? A car is coming towards you. They've got their left indicator on. They turn in the correct direction. So which side have they gone to? Their left, your right, both, neither? Studies say it is harder to tell right from left than up from down because your brain has to work harder. Sometimes you have to consider visual and spatial processing and mental rotation, such as in the case of the mirror effect. It's also easier for people who have greater differences between their limbs. People who can only write or throw and catch with their left hand, for example, find it easier to identify left from right. And that is because they are dependent on only one hand. People who are more ambidextrous find it tougher to differentiate between the two. After all, they don't instinctively know that one side of their body is very different from the other. Now, obviously, studies about this phenomenon were not conducted to stop people from being made fun of. Often, they were done to find ways to prevent medical mishaps. It is an under-researched field, but there have been studies from the 1970s onwards. And that is because identifying left and right is particularly important in the medical profession. There are numerous reports about surgeons accidentally making cuts on the wrong side of the body. One example being that of a British brain surgeon. He came out with a book in 2017. It's called Admissions. And in that book, he details how he once had to give a patient some bad news. Bad news because of a mistake that the doctor himself had made. The patient needed a nerve operated on. Marsh did so, but he drilled out the nerve on the other side of the spinal column. In the medical field, mistakes like this one are called never events. They are preventable mistakes caused by human error. Between April 2021 and March 2022, the most common type of never events recorded by the UK National Health Service was wrong site surgery. 171 out of 407 never events were wrong site surgery. And a large chunk of these were caused by a mix-up between left and right. The report lists 6 separate instances of, I'm quoting, injection to the wrong eye. Not really something you would expect a doctor to do, I'm sure. And to prevent these lateral mistakes, doctors are known to use markers to mark the area that they need to operate on, just so that they don't mess up in the middle of the surgery. Now, this does not mean that the doctors are unqualified, but doctors have to deal with a lot of pressure which sometimes causes them to make silly errors. It points to another factor that makes identification hard, and that's distractions. While studies say about 16% of the population is poor when it comes to judging left from right, The rest can also easily make a mistake, and all it takes is some ambient noise. Someone asking an unrelated question, basically anything that interferes with your concentration. You won't confuse up and down, but are likely to fumble with left and right. So how can you get better at identifying these different sides? Well, the bad news is that neuroscientists are still figuring that out. They believe that it is easier to correct in children as compared to adults. There are tricks that help in navigating this issue, but the simplest solution is pause and think for a bit before giving out directions. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.